Thank you very much, Angie. Thank you to the board for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ryan Cadagin. I'm running for Circuit Judge. I'm born and raised in Springfield. My wife's born and raised in Springfield too. We raised our daughter here as well. Lifelong resident of Springfield. The only time I didn't live in Springfield or Sangamon County was for undergraduate degree at Illinois State University and then law school at Southern Illinois University School of Law. I'm running for Circuit Judge because I think it's a perfect opportunity for continued public service. My entire career has either been fully or partially in the public service sector. I started off at the state's attorney's office and working up cases with law enforcement and bringing them through the investigation stage to the charging stage to the actual trial was an extremely rewarding experience. My work as a public defender has been an extremely rewarding experience. My work as the Sangamon County hearing officer has been extremely rewarding. In the professional life and then in personal life, boards I'm on, charities I've wanted to be involved in, have had a public sector aspect to them as well. I'm the vice president of the Friends of the Sangamon County Child Advocacy Center board. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Sangamon County Drug Court. And so the public service side of it has been the most rewarding to me. I'm a private practice practitioner as well. I own and operate my own law firm, and I've enjoyed that immensely. But the public side of it has been the draw to me. And the ultimate culmination of being a lawyer and being in public service is that of a circuit judge. So that's why I'm seeking it.
So where would that commitment to public service come from?
I think my family. My dad was Don Cadagin. He was a state's attorney and circuit judge, so I grew up around it. I grew up, tagging along with him to the courthouse. My uncle was a circuit judge as well. And so it was a part of my life from the very beginning, and I think somewhere along the line it just got instilled in me. And then I love the courthouse. I love going to work in the courthouse. It's a place where very important things happen. There can be some great moments in the courthouse. There can be some bad moments in the courthouse. But the courthouse is the hub of the legal community. And I think growing up around it, that is what has probably drawn me to it.
Do you think electing judges is the best way to choose them?
I don't know. I think it is perhaps a strange way. I'm not a politician. I do not see myself as a politician. This is the first time I've ever run for anything. Sometimes I'll get introduced to a group out on the campaign trail, and they talk about, we have politicians with us here today. And I always kind of take a pause at that because I honestly don't see myself as one. So I do think it is identifying with a party and then running, but then there's also some very strong restraints on judicial campaigns about talking about the issues, and I totally understand the reason behind those restraints. But so I'm not saying it's the best way, but the concerns about it make infusing a political side to it does have some awkwardness.
What are the top 3 or 4 characteristics that a judge should exhibit?
Sure. I think number 1 is experience in the courtroom, personally handling the cases. It is, I think that is invaluable. Being in the courtroom, handling those type of cases that the circuit judge hears from all sides, from if it's the criminal side as a prosecutor and a public defender, personally trying jury trials, I think, is the experience that is the number 1 criteria for experience, because evidentiary issues and evidentiary rulings there's not time to look up. In a lot of areas of practice of law, you can look up, take your time, research it. Ruling, objection, is that sustained or is that overruled? The only way to have that experience is to be in there doing it. So I think that's number 1. I think integrity is number 2. I think you want someone there who has proven and a reputation for doing the right thing, being honest, following through. I think those are the 2 biggest ones. All along those same lines, it's honesty, a variety of background, that has a variety of experience, I think is important too under that same umbrella. That way, who's ever ruling on a case is got a breadth of knowledge that puts them in the best position to fairly, honestly make the rulings in whatever case it is.
Just as a side note to educate our board and our readers who may eventually be watching this video, could you briefly describe the kinds of cases that would be heard in the court you're seeking?
Sure, thank you. The vacancy I'm running for, Judge Pat Kelly retired at the end of 2015. And so his call, is 1 week is criminal, 1 week is civil, then criminal, civil, and it ping-pongs back and forth like that. The criminal side is all felonies. It's traffic and misdemeanor are not handled by circuit judges. So the criminal side equals felonies. And as a prosecutor, I personally handled every type of serious felony there is, from first-degree murder, second-degree murder, aggravated criminal sexual assault, aggravated DUI, home invasion, residential burglary. You name it, I've personally prosecuted those cases, and I've also personally defended those cases. I've been a public defender since the end of 2009. I did 1 year in Logan County, and then a spot opened in Sangamon County, and I've been in Sangamon County since 2010, assigned to felony cases. So I've personally defended that whole list of cases as well, too. And that's half the call of the vacancy we're running for is criminal felonies. The second half of the call is civil, and civil is a very broad term. And what circuit judges in Sangamon County do on the civil side of it could be any number of things, from probate, which I've personally handled many probate cases, to adoptions. Again, that's been a part of one of the most enjoyable parts of my private practice is handling adoption cases, to lawsuits of any variety. Circuit judges would handle. Typically, they would handle the larger, small claims they wouldn't handle, but larger cases. I've personally tried civil cases as well, and employed those rules of evidence in trying civil jury trials. So civil is more broad than the criminal, but it's a wide variety of probate, adoptions, lawsuits, that type of thing.
And is there any particular area of law you have specialized in your private practice?
I wouldn't say specialized in. It's a general practice, so it does a little bit of everything. I've done some defense work on the private side. I've done, again, adoptions, probate, estate planning, some contractual work. The private side hasn't had a specialty, but mainly a general practice.
So I want to do a follow-up to Todd's question about the traits or characteristics. Hear time to time about judicial temperament. How would you define that, and what are qualities that you think you might have that would lend itself to that?
I thank you for saying that, because temperament is one that I would have added to Todd's list. Definitely, I think temperament is very, very.
We've never met before.
Right, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think temperament is one of the cornerstones of any good judge. It is, the power a judge has in the courtroom is immense. And having the exercise of that power and how it's done is one of the most important things I think that could possibly happen inside a courtroom. To me, the ideal temperament would be someone who has control of the courtroom, but at the same time does not lose their temper. And what I mean by lose their temper is, the typical things like yelling or, having a personal slight or something like that is, really rarely, if ever, the acceptable way to do it. Because the participants in the courtroom, this is the most important thing in their life, whether they're charged with a crime, whether they're in a major lawsuit, whether it's whatever type of case it is, the odds are that whatever they're there for, their emotions and their stress level is a 10 out of 10. And so it's not excusing that if people or participants act out in court, but it's going to happen. That's the way the courthouse works. And so making sure that the judge is maintains and doesn't fuel that fire, I think, is extremely, extremely important.
Could you talk in general terms, without specifics, about a case in your career that would have been memorable, and specifically why and what you learned from it?
Sure. There was a aggravated criminal sexual assault case that I handled as a prosecutor. One of the interesting parts professionally about being a prosecutor is you never know what you're going to walk into. You know, you wake up in the morning, you go to work, and you don't know what happened the night before. So John Milheiser and I worked that case together, and comes in, there was an aggravated criminal sexual assault of a medical student in downtown Springfield. It was an important case for a lot of reasons, and it was working the case from the moment the police officers come in to report it to helping them with the investigation, and and what I mean by that is getting search warrants for things that they asked for search warrants for, and getting DNA testing on different swabs that they had, and building the case. So professionally, the case had fingerprints, it had DNA, it had lineups, it had eyewitness testimony. It was very professionally done by the Springfield Police Department. Bringing that to trial and working it up towards trial in experts in every field and preparing those experts, ultimately picking a jury, literally the jury's picked, we're in the middle of trial, about to continue with the trial, and he ultimately pled guilty to life in prison. So the trial didn't get completed, but that trial, just because of all the moving parts to it and being there from the first day, the moment it came into the office to the moment he got life in prison, was a rewarding case. It felt true vindication for the victim, and it was a case I look back on with pride.
As you're stepping into this, looking around at the circuit court, are there any changes you think should be made?
The changes I like that are coming are specialty courts, and specialty courts have started, and the expansion of them is one that I would encourage, both in the, so what I mean by specialty courts are, right now there is a drug court. As I mentioned, I'm on the board of the Friends of the Sangamon County Drug Court, and what that board is, the drug court is a court with public funding, but the friends of that court are, if we can just make the court as kind of special as possible and as good as possible, and that can mean a number of things. In the drug court, sometimes if someone has a good week, they're tested constantly for drugs, and if they have a good week, they can be rewarded with a gas card or a card to Starbucks or something like that. Sometimes the public money doesn't have the resources for perks like that. So the Friends Court, or the Friends Board, is designed to make the drug court as good as it possibly can be. Kind of a world-class drug court is our goal. And I think mental health court is another court that is in place right now. And I think that in terms of recidivism rates and things like that, having a drug court, if the cause of the crime is drugs, addressing the cause, I think, is a great solution for decreasing recidivism. Mental health, the same thing. A veterans court is coming. Veterans court is not in place yet, but the statute has called for it, and it'll be coming most likely in 2017. And again, there's specific issues there with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that that can be addressed if they can be addressed. And I think what's exciting about these specialty courts is that they're relatively new, so the data is coming. Sangamon County Drug Court, I believe, began in 2009. I think the Sangamon County Mental Health Court was maybe a couple of years ago, and Veterans Court on the way. What I like about them is that they're trying to address the cause, and the data will be coming in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We can look back on these specialty courts, see what courts are working, what courts have, kind of borrow from each other, which courts have are doing this well, and the more options like that, the better, I think, as opposed to 30 years ago or more, it was either probation or prison. Now the options are drug court, mental health court, veterans court, prison for violent offenders, probation, maybe a task probation, maybe a first offender probation. Having the more options, the better, I think is a good thing. And that's a change that has begun, and that's a change that I would encourage to continue along those lines.
So help me understand a little bit more about this Friends of.
Sure. So the Friends of the Drug Court is raising money to help as much as possible in any way that we can. And the drug court is relied on grants in part. And so part of our goal, and we're just getting started, we just got the 501c3 paperwork, is to be a safety net in case a grant were to not be fulfilled or fall through or something like that. One, a safety net. Two, to add extra funding to things that in any time that they could be needed. If they want to do some program, there's a graduation ceremony, there are reunions, there are things like that that can be effective throughout. But if the public sector doesn't have the money for a reunion where past drug court graduates can come back and share their stories with the new class, we could step in and fulfill something like that, as well as be a safety net in a worst case scenario where funding were to dry up.
Okay.
Same with I'm the vice president of the Friends of the Child Advocacy Center, and that's the same type of thing. The Child Advocacy Center is the Sangamon County has been a great partner in running the Sangamon County Child Advocacy Center. They purchased a new building. The new building is going to have capabilities that are going to be fantastic, including medical capabilities, and forensic interviewers and forensic interview rooms that are kid-friendly and everything to make it to protect the child, but also to make sure everything's done in, again, a specific situation. If a child is a victim of sexual abuse and has to go sit in the emergency room waiting room, that is not an ideal situation with 20 other people in the room. If they can go to a medical facility and have specific trained professionals handling both their physical examination along as getting them involved in counseling, things like that, it can be the best situation possible. So as the vice president of the Friends of the Child Advocacy Center, we gave the county $50,000 several months ago to help pay for the cost of the building, and we're going to give more money too, and it can be, again, small things like painting a mural in the waiting room the county might not have the resources for, to big things like a $50,000 check. So it's just an extra layer of support on what we think is a good program. Thank you.
Would you be able to continue in those roles if you're elected? Or?
I would not. If elected, I would step down from those roles.
So I've wondered, you've had quite a bit of courtroom experience. As you reflect on judges that you've seen or appeared before, what good things have you learned? What things would you like to emulate? And what are other things that you just soon, I hope I never do that one?
Sure. The good things are, I think, a steady temperament. I think the judges who are the same judge every day in and day out, take the bench. The lawyers know what to expect. The court staff knows what to expect. In a professional, steady way, I think that's one of the most effective things. The thing I would try to avoid would be to bring anything going on outside in a life into the courtroom, because the participants need to know what they're walking into. So what I would try to avoid is, you're rushed one day and then you have plenty of time the next day, or if the judge is in a bad mood one day or in a good mood one day. Making sure that there was availability is another one that I would really try to emulate. Lawyers' schedules are very, very busy a lot of times, and you have situations where one lawyer says, hey, we'd like to get a hearing date, and they go back and forth trying to tie down a date. Making sure the judge is available as much as possible, I think, is one thing I would definitely try to emulate, because a judge is going to be at the courthouse. They're there all day, every day working, and so their schedules oftentimes, I think, can be more accommodating to allow for the lawyers who might be in several different counties at once or have cases all over the state. So I think steadiness, I think availability, temperament, again, would be, I think, extremely important. Justice Garmon has a quote talking about making sure all participants feel that they have procedural due process. And I think that's an important thing too. No matter what type of case it is, no matter how, why it gets into the courtroom, I think making sure every participant, whether they have a lawyer or not, feels that they got a fair shake. And so you say, here's my case. I think the judges who listen to that, and they might rule against them every time, but if someone brings a case, I think they've got a right to feel that their argument was heard, and that's the style I would try to copy.
So are there orientation sessions for new judges? Who provides those?
There is. I'm sorry.
What about continuing education for judges?
There's a new judges school, which I think it's in January of 2017. And then they have conferences, I think it's every year, where judges go back for, more training on both new laws and both new things that are coming to the courtroom.
So otherwise, you'd keep up on your own with Supreme Court decisions or appellate court decisions?
Right.
That might have an effect or impact on you.
I think that's right. I think the only structured training is the conferences that they have, but then on your own, I think it would definitely, or I would definitely, make sure to stay up on the most recent cases, particularly for any cases that would appear before me.
Does anyone have any other questions? Is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just add, and I would throw this in as a kind of awkward intro, because campaigning is very awkward, because we're taught humility in life, and we're not supposed to go around patting ourselves on the back. And so campaigning is like the ultimate pat yourself on the back, which is somewhat an uncomfortable position to be in. But I do think the Illinois State Bar Association had a judicial advisory poll where lawyers who are in the Illinois State Bar has a quote saying, I don't have this quote exactly, but it's along the lines of, lawyers in the courtroom and in the courthouse are uniquely positioned to, to judge the qualities of potential judges or judges. And I think that makes sense. I think any profession, they know within the profession who is qualified. And so I would, refer anyone, any voter or reader to that poll. There are several, but maybe 7 or 8 categories. And of the 7th Circuit judicial candidates, I received the highest scores in every category. So I do think that's relevant to the voter, and so I would refer anyone to look at that Illinois State Bar Association poll.